Hi everyone, Warren from Excel Employee Leave Tracker, here to show you how to quickly create a pivot table with Excel in 10 minutes or less. If you like this video, please click on the thumbs up icon and leave a comment below. Today I have a small data set that has 4 columns. The first column is titled Superhero, the second, Real Name, Secret Identity, the third, Employer, and fourth and final, Annual Salary. This data set only goes down to 32 rows, so it's a relatively small data set. Your data set may contain multiple rows and columns, but for this presentation, I believe this will be very helpful to help you understand how a pivot table works. A pivot table is used to manipulate the data that you have without actually changing the data so that it can be presented in different ways. It's very useful when you're using large data sets. My first suggestion is to transfer this information into a table, and that will allow you to add multiple rows or columns or information as needed without making multiple changes to your pivot table and making the changes relatively easily. So the first thing that we would do is first thing that we would do is to ensure that our cursor is highlighting a cell that has data in it. Go to Insert, Table. Because our cursor has highlighted a cell that has data, the dancing ants are surrounding all our data source or data. Ensure that the check mark is next to My Table Has Headers, which are found on row 1. Click OK. And now, depending on the version of Excel and your color scheme, you will see that the data has now changed to multiple colors. This is now a table. And to just verify it's a table, in the lower right-hand corner of your data source, you will see this little box, and that indicates that it's now a table. The next thing I would suggest is for us to create the pivot table. So again, we're going to click on Insert, Pivot Table. Because we have our cursor in a cell that contains data, Excel automatically picks up our data range or table. You want to ensure that the radio button is click on New Worksheet. You generally don't want to put your pivot table next to your data source. And you click on OK. And now you will see a separate tab with pivot table fields on the right hand side. The different fields that we have are the different column names that we had on our original data source. So now we can make changes, or we can present a new report without touching our original data source. So that's one of the the benefits that using a pivot table can bring to you. Now, pivot tables are broken up into 4 sectors: the filters, which we'll talk about later, columns, rows, and values. Columns go from north to south, or are the alphabetized letters. The rows goes from east to west, or are the numbers. And values are those or that information that we wish to have account for, such as a sum, or if you have anything that has a number in it. So now we can rearrange our data to be more visual to meet our needs. Now let's say our supervisor asks us for a report of all superheroes and their salary. So with this, you can probably use the filters and go one by one. But with the pivot table, we don't have to touch the original data source. We can use and rearrange the data as we need. So let's try it with superhero names. If you left click with your mouse button and drag it to columns and release, you will now see the superhero names going from A through, I believe there was 32, all the way to AF. Now, that may not be the way that you wish to show this report. So what we can do is we can either click on the down caret button and remove field. Let's change this up from superheroes and let's drag it. So again, with the left mouse button, I drag it down to rows and I release. And now I have it going up and down. So the next thing is annual salary. So what we'll do is we'll left mouse button, highlight it, and then drag it down to values. And now we have the values in a separate column. And this looks more reasonable of how a report would look. But let's say we want to make it more eye-pleasing. So what we want to do is we want to put our cursor in one of the cells. Let's put it in Batgirl's annual salary. What we want to do is we want to right mouse click. We want to go to value field settings. We want to show values as. We want to go to number format. We want to click on currency. We're going to change the decimal place to 0. And we're going to have the symbol for $. Now, depending on what country you're in, you may want to change this to the currency symbol of your country. Since I'm in the United States, I'll use the $. Click OK. And click OK. And now we have it changed to the dollar amount. Now let's say we don't want to use their superhero names, but we want to use their real names. That's simple. What we do is you can either click on the down caret, remove field, left click with the mouse, highlight real name, secret identity, drag it down to rows, and now you have the rows with their real name. Now let's talk about the filters for a moment. Let's say your supervisor wants to show who is employed by whom. So what you would do is you would left click on employer and drag it down to filters. And with the down caret button, you can now click on DC and it will now show anyone who is hired or works for DC. You can then change it to Marvel by clicking on the down caret button, click on Marvel, and now you have the Marvel. But your supervisor then says that she wants to have multiple reports, one for Marvel and one for DC. That's quite simple too. Excel can do that for us as well. So what we want to do is we want to change this go back to Marvel or go back to the down caret button, change it to all, click OK. We want to then go back to the pivot table analyze. We want to go all the way over to the pivot table down caret button. And then you want to go down to options and then click on the down caret button for that. Click on show report filter pages. And this pop-up box will show report filter pages. We want to click on OK. And bam, we now have two separate tabs that contain all employees who work for DC and all employees that work for Marvel. Now, let me show you why we want to change this into a table. Let's say we have a new superhero on the scene. Let's say his name is XL Man. Sorry about that. And let's say his name is Dwayne Johnson. And let's say he works for DC and his salary is $123,000. So we now have new data. If we go back to pivot table and click on refresh all, Dwayne Johnson now appears in our pivot table. And because he works for, I believe I said DC, he now shows up on the DC spreadsheet. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Please click on the thumbs up icon and have a great day.